Welcome to Live from the Table, the official podcast for the world-famous Comedy Cellar. I am here with Noam Dwarman, the owner of the Comedy Cellar.
Hello.
We have a very special... I'm Periel, and we are here with a very special guest today, Ami Kozak, musician, comedian, impressionist. His podcast is called Ami's House. He has a band called Distant Cousins.
First of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. And yes, go ahead.
No, I'm very happy. I'm very happy to have you here. I just want to say that I just asked ChatGPT during Periel's introduction, what do you call a vocal inflection which goes up at the end of a sentence? And then I didn't think this was possible. ChatGPT actually made an anti-Semitic comment that I'm not going to repeat, but then it said it's called a rising intonation, more specifically when it's used in statements. Like it's often referred to as uptalk or upspeak.
Oh, that's a good title for something. Uptalk.
I've been seeing all these gurus around giving coaching on how to be assertive and make sure your words land and are affirmative. And are assertive, that they land down instead of up if you want to be super agreeable, or strong and assertive.
Absolutely. But you know what? Any masculine person knows that without being taught. I actually believe that.
Do you want me to be more masculine?
No, for a woman, it's okay. When a man does it, I like Ezra Klein.
Yes. I mean, we all know this, right? I mean, and this is what's interesting, right? Everything is up. And with Democrats, what they're really seriously good at is policy, but it gets too caught in the technicals of policy. You're totally right.
Okay, but now listen. With the policy, I don't think he has a lisp.
No, there's something there.
He does, absolutely, but he has vocal fry. Can you do the fry? I didn't mean to put you through your paces, but can you?
Yeah, a little bit there. I don't have. It's this.
If you can get an Ezra Klein imitation together,
I gotta get
and God bless the guy. Like, he's actually a force for good right now in politics, because he's kind of pouring cold water and giving the Democrats a slap across the face with the thanks I needed, that skin bracer. But I can't listen to him. I can't listen to more than 5 minutes of the guy.
Because
Don't say that.
Because
Don't say that. That's if he's saying good things, then
it's my shortcoming.
It's a pet peeve. If the intonation goes up, it's just he's triggered.
It is a visceral reaction I have
to my voice, to the sounds of my voice.
No, to it. Well, actually, when I hear Ezra Klein, I just picture you. No, and I know this is wrong, and I know people. This is probably the most bigoted thing you've ever heard me say on this podcast. I know it's wrong. I know that it's wrong. I'm actually confessing to a shortcoming. I'm confessing to a foible, but I'm saying that. I do have that reaction. I don't know where it comes from.
This is the problem with modern day masculinity. Because
don't list, because that sounds like you're making fun of gays.
No,
I'm not making fun of gays.
There's an impediment, a wide tongue thing happening. Where what's the problem is that what Republican establishment has reinforced in a lot of modern men is an aversion to a voice that goes up at the end, and it's a problem.
Now, I don't, but to go deeper with it, because I do believe in just like in the animal kingdom, there's the mating dance, and there's just certain things that no matter what you want to say, the opposite sex responds to. And one of the things, obviously, they have to respond to is masculinity. They have to. There's just no way that women don't naturally respond to masculinity. And they've got this generation of beta or gamma males. And Periel, as a woman with a libido, don't you find it weird when a man takes on a metrosexual, whatever you want to call it?
I mean, I think that
you want a man to be a man, don't you?
I think that different people are attracted to
asking
different things. Me personally, I like a pretty masculine guy. Me personally, but I'm also
Who doesn't?
A lot of people. I'm also not like a super delicate woman either. Like, I'm a little bit
trashy,
masculine. There's always, though, the exception is the Prince, Michael Jackson, effeminate, confident, suave sort of thing that women go crazy for.
No.
Explain it.
Michael Jackson, women did not go crazy for.
Children.
Prince.
Yeah. And vice versa. But Prince, yes, but Prince
That's
was
different.
not actually what we're describing here.
He's androgynous.
Prince was androgynous, but Prince had a seething sexuality about him.
He was also, I mean, you can't, that's not a good example.
Why?
Because he was like a genius musician and a celebrity of like.
But Prince was like a porn movie.
Yeah.
Prince exuded
Sex, pure sex.
Yeah.
Ezra Klein is a close second.
I think that people.
I'm sorry.
Purple Rain?
I don't even know the guy. We have
Purple Rain?
friends in common. I'm sorry. I feel terrible.
Purple Rain?
By the way, I saw your Douglas Murray imitation. It was so good. Was it Douglas Murray ordering breakfast or something like that?
Yes, well, no, I was very hungry. You do enough podcasts and you get on Lex Fridman and you talk about the fall of the West and you talk about democracies and death cults, it works up quite an appetite. I'm not so public about my food choices and preferences, but when you're hungry and you've got nothing but a diner in the middle of Austin, Texas, you order what you can. So, yes, well, you do.
He's got a little bit of Robert Shaw telling the story in Jaws, just shark's eyes.
Yeah, the shark's eyes. He could do it. He could do a Jaws remake, right? When you're looking at the eyes of the sharks, and many different men went into the water and they realized the sharks were part of ISIS.
Anyway.
Radical great whites. And that's a problem. They're no longer whites. They're from a different part of the world.
So
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, very good. And I'm not even sure. How do we know? How did we know you from Twitter? Like, how did I?
The world of the internet's an interesting place. You have what they call IRL, in real life, and then there's so much cross-section now where everybody's familiar, even with people they don't actually meet or know in person. So I think, we've both, crossed paths with different figures in this space in the last 18 months, talking about Israel, anti-Semitism, and just I've
changed my mind on Israel, by the way.
Yeah?
I'm anti.
Oh, okay, good. Good. Let's start there. I mean, I debated Candace Owens. I'm the comedian who debated Candace Owens, the famous Muslim Quarters clip. That's maybe where you first saw me. That one got around a bit.
So when I'm walking through Jerusalem and you see, and they say these are the Muslim quarters, this is where the Muslims are allowed to live, that doesn't feel like a bastion of freedom to me. So I guess.
Oh, I don't think it's where they're allowed to live in Jerusalem. I think it's that there's an Armenian quarter. It's not saying the Armenians can only live here. It's that there are communities, just like there's a Jewish community in Jersey here, and there's a Muslim community in here. I don't think, to my understanding, it's not restrictions within Israel proper of where Israeli.
I think it is where they have. I mean, at least that's what the rabbi who was taking me around. He said these are the Muslim quarters. So this is where the Muslims.
Or she called it the Muslim quarters, not the Muslim quarter.
And she thought it meant like it was like a
living
pen,
quarters,
a holding pen.
So it was a revealing moment in a lot of ways, and we can talk about that.
I'll tell you what I do want to talk about.
Yeah.
Are you following the latest dust up between Sam Harris and Joe Rogan?
Yes, I am. That and Dave Smith making the rounds and all that kind of stuff I find is an interesting place where it's sort of like now we're at a point where post-October 7th, we're looking at where the chips have fallen with these competing narratives, and there's sort of this, there's the far left, the far right, and the movable middle. And we're all kind of competing for that if we're talking about messaging and getting the word out of what the truth of the matter is. There's the movable middle, and I think people confuse casting aspersions on what they mean.
Aspersions means like a detriment.
Yeah.
What
they mean for the extremities of these movements versus the movable middle. Sometimes they use the wrong aspersions and cast them at the movable middle, which is self-defeating. And there's a lot to discuss in the woke left, the ascendant woke right that I've been concerned about. And I think we've crossed paths in discussing some of those things.
Okay, let's talk about this. By the way, just Tiana, take down that thing until we're ready to show it. I don't want to give away the
prize.
It's called Bury the Lead, LEDE.
I know how to spell it. There was a guy, Nathan Robinson, this far left guy, and of course we all make these mistakes. I just remember because he's so arrogant and nasty, and he accused somebody of burying the lead, and he spelled it LEAD, and I was like, and I didn't correct him because I know that's such a. If you do that, it's bad karma. Someone's going to catch you doing the same dumb mistake. But you think he would have known. Anyway, but the worst time to misspell bury the lead is when you're accusing somebody of burying the lead. Anyway, so the ascendant. Listen, you may not read it right now, but I've been in a very, very dark place the last 48 hours about this. I actually spent a lot of the night last night watching Ian Carroll videos, and it was. I couldn't wait to go watch Ezra Klein after this. It really made me feel sick to my stomach. This was because I was watching it because of the Sam Harris thing. Do you think you can give a good encapsulation for the viewers what's going on, what Sam Harris said?
Yes. Well, you basically have most recently, you're seeing the elements of what we call the woke right, this sort of new ascendant, some of it very unapologetically anti-Semitic commentary happening on Twitter.
Now, who coined that term? Was it Konstantin Kisin?
I think it was Lindsay.
James Lindsay?
James Lindsay, who did coin the term, and then people like Konstantin also popularized it. Some people thought it was just some trollish slander, trollish insult to use on people who hate the woke left, but are now emerging as these America First woke right people and figures. Jake Shields, Jackson Hinkle, Candace Owens is kind of in that category too, where it really is positioned as very similar to woke left in the sense that while woke left has very simple diagnoses for all the world's problems, they blame the patriarchy or radical feminism, Zionism, capitalism. The woke right does the same thing, same animating principles, but they just are more explicit about the anti-Semitic part, where they blame the Jews and by extension, everything the Jews control. Capitalism, they brought in radical feminism. Every bad leftist idea is suddenly Jewish. So it all kind of is rooted in a lot of anti-Semitism, but it's not animated by values and virtue and principles. It's tribal. It's the same. And so I don't, that's why it's woke, and it's just now on the right, and it's really troubling. What's been going on now is that some of these ideas, for a long time, I thought to myself, they can be ignored. You know, if Candace wants to descend into the deep, dark corners of the internet, let her do it. And as long as it's in these Twitter spaces with some of the world's worst vicious anti-Semites where they can shoot the shit and kibitz about how much Jews are to blame for everything, fine, let them do it. That's a Twitter spaces. We can ignore it. But once it starts to reach these mainstream platforms, and you see Candace now on Theo Von or Ian Carroll on Rogan, and even the Daryl Cooper episode, which I think is a little bit different, which we can talk about, but you start to see these things becoming a little more mainstream. You go between these two different corners where we want to be able to discuss difficult ideas, even offensive ideas, but also Jordan Peterson says things get bad one small step at a time. Gradually, all of a sudden you find yourself in a space where think about the things you can say about Jews now that you couldn't say 5 years ago, not because of cancel culture, but because of basic decency. All of a sudden you find yourself in this place where the Overton window has moved so much, it's so desensitized, Kanye West is just wearing swastikas with very little consequence, and that was very concerning. Now, there's different ways to react to this. There's the overreactions that you saw pre-October 7th from, I think, Jews on the progressive left, where they threw the term at everything to the point where it loses its...
Through what term?
Anti-Semitism at everybody who misspoke, everybody who was ignorant, everybody who was curious. It's like anti-Semitism, one size fits all. And when all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail,
yeah.
Right? And that was the tool, and then it loses all its cultural power. And that's the overreaction. And then there's what I see now is the underreaction, the lack of reaction, the apologetics, pretending it's not there. That's wrong too. To be discerning, you should react. I'm reacting to it. Not over, not under, but actually reacting. And you have, in order to have credibility and integrity in this space, you have to react to what you're seeing in front of you. The way Sam Harris is approaching it, I think, is misguided because, for years, Sam Harris used to go off on Glenn Greenwald and all these people who misrepresented his views on Islam, the way Ben Affleck would portray him on Bill Maher about Islam, completely misrepresenting him or using ad hominem attacks. But then he's using those very same tactics on people who are having conversations he's not comfortable with.
I don't think he's doing that, but I'll let you.
Okay.
I'll let you.
But when he says Joe Rogan can have two journalists there with him at all times and pay them each $1 million, I'm like, Joe... He could, you could on your, and not you, Sam, you could have it on your podcast too. You don't do that. You don't feel you need to do that. It just, to me, it rings as like, when you're met with ideas you disagree with or conversations you don't like, to insult and call people names or to dismiss it and say it's beneath and say it's just causing harm rather than tackle the ideas.
I'm surprised to hear you say that stuff. But,
well, then I think I'm for Gad Saad's response to Sam Harris, where he came out and he said, I've been an advocate for all the same causes that I've been an advocate for, and very pro-Jewish, very pro-Israel. But he said, if there's things on Twitter I don't like and there's people coming at me, my instinct is not to go to Elon Musk and complain. I ignore these people. I don't engage with them, but I don't call for them to be arrested or canceled or things like that. So I get the argument on free speech absolutism that Gadsat is talking about, but just that Sam Harris is very consequentialist about it, that we can have free speech as long as it doesn't lead to this or this or this.
He didn't. Well, I don't think he said that at all. And I think
in his response, he said, from my understanding, he just said that the conversations Joe Rogan is having is irresponsible. It's leading to real bad consequences in our society, and therefore, I don't know, like he shouldn't have them, or he should have journalists on to regulate his conversations.
No, he said I think he meant you should have a staff. So let me tell you where I come from.
So I just thought, whatever you think about his position, to the general public, it looks wildly hypocritical and inconsistent.
Well, the general public it thinks it's hypocritical because it's being spun that way.
And I think he could do a better job actually combating what's being said, and that's more effective to the movable middle than calling Dave a misinformation artist. And I don't think Dave should respond by calling him a fucking clown either. I think both are self-defeating.
Well, this is hard for me because obviously this is surrounds the comedy community, and I don't want to make enemies. So I guess we should start by saying I don't know Joe Rogan, but everybody who knows him likes him, and even Sam Harris was very clear about not wanting to call him an anti-Semite, or Sam kind of accused him of unwittingly participating in this deleterious process.
Yeah.
So, to the extent that it's possible to talk about this without, being read as accusing him of being anti-Semitic, I would like to try to do that because I'd be shocked if he were anti-Semitic. I think with him, the Occam's razor is if you have a guy who just a couple weeks ago was trying to explain why the moon landing was probably fake. You have a guy who believes I think what most people consider is like the really far end of the curve of conspiracy theories, the most outlandish conspiracies there are. He's open to them, at least, if he doesn't. So why wouldn't he believe 5 different conspiracies about the Jews, right? So you don't have to be an anti-Semite if you're that. But unfortunately, conspiracy theorists always find themselves, in the end, embracing anti-Semitic ideas.
Right.
But the first time this came to my attention was way back when there was a conversation with that woman, Crystal Ball, was that her name?
Yep.
Was on the Rogan show, and they were discussing Ilhan Omar, who had said, well, she said a couple things. She had said about how the Jews are hypnotizing the world, but I think the particular comment they were discussing was that it's all about the Benjamin.
Right.
Now, Omar had meant that Israel was controlling the government with money. And Sam and Crystal Ball, was defending Ilhan Omar, and Sam Harris said, and got attention, he says, come on, that's not anti-Semitic. Everybody knows Jews are into money like Italians are into pizza.
I mean, Joe Rogan said this,
yeah,
not Sam Harris.
Yeah, everybody knows that Joe Rogan said everybody knows that Jews are into money like Italians are into pizza. And I was like, first of all, Ilhan Omar's remark wasn't about Jews being into money. She was about Jews using money, buying influence, which is not the stereotype of the Jews, the Sturmer, like, the money grubbing Jews.
Yeah.
So, and then everybody said, he's just kidding. And it's true in the comedy world. We make jokes like that all the time.
Of course.
But if you gave me sodium pentothal, I would have had to say at the time, yes, but he wasn't really making a joke. He was making a point.
Yeah.
Like he could have said, everybody knows Jews are into money like priests are into little boys. The point is that, humor can be humor, and humor can also be a tool to make a very serious point that you mean 100%.
Yeah.
And I felt at the time, I said, does he actually mean that? But you know what? All right, whatever. If somebody thinks Jews are into money, I could.
But I think, yeah.
Wait, one second. So that was
Okay.
it. And then, and then actually, Eric Weinstein, I think actually did tweak Joe a little bit about that on the show. I think he did. I'm not 100% sure. But, that was certainly nothing to base an opinion on. But then as you were, I became alarmed in the last, Well, then actually during the vaccine stuff, and this is where it gets to where Sam Harris' point. During the vaccine time, Rogan was bringing on people who were saying that the vaccine didn't work. Now, that's where Sam Harris is saying this is irresponsible, because unless you're 100% sure this vaccine is not going to save lives, X number of people are going to take your word for this. They're not going to get vaccinated, and they're going to die. And actually, we do know that in states where they had less vaccine uptake, they had higher rates of death. I don't think there's anybody serious who doesn't understand that the vaccine does save lives if you're in a certain cohort of people who are vulnerable to COVID. Yes, they might have been right that healthy 25-year-old people didn't need to be taking it. But anyway, I'm
not sure if history right now favors that Sam Harris position, though, right? I mean,
I think no. This is the problem. I don't think there is even 0.1% argument by anybody credible that a 60-year-old should not be taking the vaccine.
Right. But that wasn't the argument being made then.
Well,
the argument being made then was everyone should take the vaccine, and if you had questions of discernment, you were a skeptic.
That was one of the arguments being made. But
in the culture was
no. But one of the other arguments that Rogan just said a couple weeks ago to take a totally ineffective experimental vaccine, and then he had on Dr. Malone, who's a quack, who said at the time, I noted, that part of the reason we don't know what's going on with the vaccine is because Israel made a deal with Pfizer to suppress any information of bad vaccine outcomes, and he called it Fizreal. So I noted it, and then the deluge came with Candace Owens and Jake Shields and Dan Bilzerian.
He also had Sanjay Gupta on to try to make the point, and he just botched it. So.
Gupta botched it. Yeah.
He had Gupta on. He said, "Let's make your case." And
Rogan was good.
And all Gupta said was, "Take a vaccine, Joe. Please. I'm here to get you to take a vaccine."
Gupta was terrible.
And he was terrible. So I just in defense of that whole conversation. But you're saying what was troubling was that moment when he brought up Fizreal?
No, I think bringing Gupta on is exactly what Sam Harris was calling for.
And he did.
Right. But it's notable because you can remember it so clearly. It's not the normal process, right? And then So then this is just like, biting at Joe's heels around the edges, little kind of criticisms I had of what was going on. It wasn't like any huge matter, and I would forget about it shortly. But then what's happened now is, as you said, you have people like Candace Owens saying things like, every year at Passover, Christian babies disappear. Their bodies are found. The Jews are doing this.
Frankists,
this Jewish.
Very clever.
Frank is called hiding behind Jews, doing to this very day. But in Israel, which was established as a haven for pedophiles.
Israel, she pronounces it. Israel.
So now, and then you have this guy like Ian Carroll saying things about the Talmud allows rape, and that Jewish mobsters control the country, and Epstein is a stain on the Jews because Jewish billionaires control everything, and I don't know what else. And Jews did 9/11, which of course, not every conspiracy is easily debunked, but we all should remember that it wasn't that long ago that Bin Laden's letter went viral, where Bin Laden took responsibility for 9/11. So you got to, work that out.
Of course, Ian Carroll says, I'm not saying all Jewish people, but you have to own Epstein, all Jewish people, in the same sentence.
Well, they all say something like, not all Jewish people, my Jewish friends. Yeah. I'm only doing this for the Jews. The Jews would be so much better. I want what's best for the Jews. It's a total tick.
Yes.
And at that point, you would think that Rogan would cordon himself off from people that are what I would have thought were indefensible. Just like when there was a famous comedian years ago who got caught on tape, saying horrible anti-black things. I removed that person from my orbit. I didn't want to go on his network anymore. I said, you have to have limits. So, and then also, and Sam kind of, mixed the two issues. Also, you have just last week, Rogan had on the air a doctor who said that polio is not real. Now, again, and I think that's what Sam is saying. Is like, listen, if you're going to go on super spreading the idea that polio is not real, you need to have some people on staff to say, yes, Joe, we checked this out. You're on strong ground here. Now, Sam Harris may feel that he's capable of doing that himself on scientific matters, or he may actually, I'm sure he does, actually consult people, but he also doesn't have a steady diet of bringing on, for lack of a better word, fringe opinions about medicine and things like this. So that's where we're at. And I don't think Sam at all meant to say that you shouldn't be having these conversations with people. He's saying if you're going to be a super spreader of very, very radioactive ideas, unless you're sure, in other words, there's two ways to look at it. You can say, well, Joe, I assume you believe this. You're standing behind it. Or if you're saying you're just having a conversation, well, okay, then, check out some of this stuff before you say, well, let me just limit it to this one thing. What do you think about having a doctor on? You're the biggest show in the world. And without any challenge, let the doctor display or promulgate her view that nobody has to be afraid of polio. It's not a real disease. How would you criticize that? Without the crazy right-wing people say you don't believe in free speech.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Like, how would you criticize that person?
Would you criticize someone for bringing on a doctor in the biggest show in the world that says polio is fake?
Well, here's the thing. I just think it's a little bit of a strange position to take to say, here's what you should do, Joe, rather than I have a big podcast too. I'll have somebody on. We'll unpack that, and this will be my contribution. Or I'll go on the show and confront why I had issues with those things. Because if someone's not in good faith, if someone's hateful, if someone's bigoted and anti-Semitic proudly, like, I'm discerning to say that person's not engageable and worth platforming or engaging with, and to do so and not push back is pretty irresponsible.
I'm shocked to hear you say that.
Why is that?
Because people are going to die if they think polio is not real, and it's not true.
Right. Well, let's just rewind a little bit.
I mean, every human is responsible to take into account the predictable outcomes of their behavior.
I think we're a little too preoccupied on trying to prove like who's hateful or harmful versus
I didn't say anything about hateful.
No, or versus who is right or wrong or what's true. Like, let's prove what's true versus what's hateful. And a lot of the times, in terms of Joe and noticing a pattern or whatever, like, to me, it's kind of absurd to think that like Joe Rogan is in any way anti-Semitic. Like,
we're talking about polio. That's why.
No, but in all those cases where he mentioned the joke and all that kind of stuff, I think it's like.
Yeah, but let's stick to the polio case.
Yes,
because I think that let's get past that,
right,
and then we can get to the anti-Semitic cases, which are harder.
Okay. Well, I think in terms of we're attributing where things stand right now, like. The medical establishment in general, in terms of post-COVID, does have a lot to account for with the lack of trust in the medical apparatus post-COVID. When they told everyone, you have to stay home or you're going to kill grandma, and then the BLM riots go out and everyone's out and about and they don't say anything about it, like, you have to own the fact that in that time, people lost a lot of trust and faith in the medical establishment that got it wrong.
I spoke about that on my show for 2 years before anyone was talking about it.
So for Joe now to be curious, and as he's always been, about alternative ideas, which has always been the nature of his show, to be curious about different kinds of opinions that go against the grain, right or wrong, his ability to engage in those conversations, like, what do you want to say? I'm not saying it should be without scrutiny or pushback. I would, if I were Sam Harris, rather than just saying, he's just doing a lot of damage. Like, if he has what to say, go on Joe and explain it. Have a guest on and counter it. He's got a platform too. So, I don't know, like, what are you saying? Restrict the speech and not say I'm just saying, what's the alternative to bad ideas?
I'm saying that if you're going to, and it's funny, I always felt this way. I mean, Mike Huckabee was hawking some, I don't remember what it was. And I'm like, how dare you? Listen, I mean, we always have looked down our noses at anybody hawking bullshit supplements. What did the people in the carts that used to go around from town to town, the hucksters that would sell elixirs? Did we not think that people selling elixirs were engaged in some sort of morally questionable behavior. This is a cousin to selling elixirs. Unless in good faith you say, no, I looked into this. I think this is legit. In which case you could be wrong. But then I say, but if you're just gonna say this is kind of titillating, polio's not real, and the vaccine doesn't help anybody, and drink this. And I heard that Laetrile cures cancer. Let's have an episode where somebody says, you know what? You know how to cure your cancer? Stop with that conventional medicine. Just take peach pit extract.
Are we taking agency away from all these consumers that are just going to listen to this and then
That's a different matter. I'm not taking agency away from anybody. I'm saying realistically, if I put somebody on this show that says, stop with your chemotherapy, stop with your cancer medication, just take this peach pit extract. People say, no, did you look into this? What do people take you seriously?
But they have a right to say,
everybody has a right.
It's my body.
No,
it's my treatment. I'm not saying you're telling them what to do, but we can also have a little faith in people to say, that was an interesting episode. I'd like to hear alternative opinions or whatever. And they're not just going to go and not take a polio vaccine.
Well, we know they go and not take the vaccines because we saw in the red states, they don't take the vaccine. Or far fewer take the vaccine.
Yes,
and more die.
I would say also that the people pushing for the vaccine on that side should have allowed for a little more discernment and nuance to say, if you're really, really old, take the vaccine.
Yes.
If you're younger, they wouldn't do that.
Yes, the person.
So you're responding. Also, Joe Rogan, in a sense, in those conversations, is reacting to a reality where there's been an immense erosion of trust in the medical establishment.
So then you answered
He's
my
not
question.
at fault for that.
The guy selling the elixir is not at fault. It's just the idiots who bought it from him.
Well, if you're being intentionally deceptive and then selling somebody something under false pretenses, you're committing fraud. Are you saying Joe is committing fraud by talking to somebody with an alternative point of view on polio?
No, I said that it's a close cousin of that, and because this is what Sam is saying, is that you have, if you know that the person taking the elixir or the person simply following the medical advice of the guest that you're putting on your show, if you know the outcome is the same, and I'm just saying, Sam is saying, check into it. Like you're not telling somebody about hair dye that you're talking about very consequential matters.
Sure,
and consequential matters have to be treated with respect.
But I'm surprised on your position because it seems from on Twitter and stuff that assuming good faith here. The solution to bad ideas is better ideas. Of bad speech is good speech. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. Do you not subscribe to those principles?
Yes, of course I do. But the whole point.
So Sam shouldn't just say, "Oh, this is just bad and harmful." He should put some sunlight on it.
Sunlight. I'm sure he will. And others have already. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Is not an overnight process. Listen, this is what I said. We all know the ACLU used to, but I defend the Nazis' right to speak.
Skokie,
we defend the Nazis' right to deny the Holocaust. And we know that sunlight is the best disinfectant for that. That is not an argument to defend the person who's out there denying the Holocaust.
Right.
Nor is it an argument for the person to present the person who denies the Holocaust, unless that's the point you want to contribute to society. Now, you can have a debate, have someone on to debate the person who wants to deny the Holocaust. If it's a matter, if you want
exposing something,
if you want to be the sunlight and the disinfectant, which is what you would think we all want to be. We all want to contribute to the good of the marketplace of ideas.
Right.
We don't want to be the guy who contributes the bacteria that the sunlight has to now come and fix, do we?
But you want to leave the marketplace of ideas open to dissent and disagreement.
It is.
In other words, let's say there's a doctor hypothetically who was going on, I don't know if this was in the 90s, but was saying, I'm telling you, thalidomide is dangerous for these pregnant women. And someone said, are you kidding me? The medical establishment, the FDA has approved this medicine. It's helping with nausea. It's helping so many women. If they stop taking it, they're going to get very sick. And then what happened? We had thalidomide babies, right? So there are cases where people sound the alarm. In some cases, they're wrong. In some cases, they're right. You want to leave it open to inquiry and debate. I don't know if the polio question
that's a totally different matter.
is comparable to Holocaust denial.
It's closer to Holocaust denial than it is thalidomide babies.
And I don't agree with her. I don't agree with the things being claimed, but like we're so afraid of wrong ideas that what's the alternative to challenging those ideas that being espoused on Joe Rogan?
Yeah, but we know, unfortunately, that conspiracy theories. Look, here we are in 2025 America, and these anti-Semitic conspiracy theories are at
they're resonating. Yeah,
all-time high,
a 90-year high.
Absolutely.
So there's your Margaret. Your sunlight's the best disinfectant. Sunlight is a treatment.
No, the people perpetuating those to me, like ridicule, satire, making fun of them that's what I'd like to do.
Yes, but you're not.
And if Joe had Jake Shields on tomorrow, I'd be more in line with what you're saying. Where it's like, okay, but I guess I'm just drawing the line of my degree is a little different as to who I'm assessing as like real harmful figures that have no redeeming social value or intellectual value.
He did have Daryl on.
Yeah, let's talk about that one.
And Daryl said that Hitler was against Kristallnacht, and if you have a more sophisticated understanding of Daryl's arguments, you know that this comes from David Irving. That the general argument is that Hitler was protective of the Jews.
Like in 1938, which is pretty far down the line, when Kristallnacht happened, it was kind of a nationwide pogrom against the Jews in Germany that was launched primarily by Goebbels, the propaganda minister. But there was outrage in the German cities. People in Berlin, a lot of the places were outraged by what was going on, and Hitler had to actually get on the phone with Goebbels and say, "Cut this shit out. Like this is not good. Like not because he loves the Jews all of a sudden, obviously, but because this is bad propaganda."
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there was Bergen-Belsen, there was Dachau, there was Buchenwald, and subsequently, of course, the great big Holocaust legend has been built up into its almost impregnable form now, where the whole world now believes that one man, Adolf Hitler, mad, of course, one madman, Adolf Hitler, killed 6 million people in Auschwitz, etc. On this great big romantic notion, which is kept alive for various reasons of international finance and high politics and statesmanship, it's been kept alive because nobody dares attack it. But I've been heartened in my approach by the knowledge that the documents that I had found about Hitler and the Jewish question, remarkably enough, all the genuine documents about that showed him extending his hand to protect them. So anything that had been done to them had been done by people far lower down the scale, ordinary common criminals. We have to explain, you see, that the documents which do exist in the file, the genuine documents, show Hitler trying to protect the Jews. The Night of Broken Glass, that famous event in November 1938 when thousands of Jewish shops were smashed and burned down and looted and plundered. 60 or 70 Jews were murdered by individual gangsters that night. 100 or 200 synagogues were burnt down. We have to explain how it is that when Hitler gets the word of that at 2 o'clock in the morning, I know because I've spoken to all the people who were with him at that precise moment, I know how he got the news, he pulls out every organ stop to try and stop this madness.
He said at other times that Daryl said that Churchill was installed by Zionists to pursue Zionist interests and fight World War II. And if you know the full David Irving argument, David Irving says the Jews bought Churchill. All he had to do, they gave him money, and all he had to do in return was turn his guns from this direction towards Germany.
From 1936 onwards, he was financed by a little secret pressure group called the Focus. They funded him. They weren't all Jews. They were primarily Jewish, but they were also left-wing socialists and left-wing conservative members of parliament. The then chairman of the British, of the Shell Petroleum Company, wrote out a cheque for Churchill of the order of £40,000, which in modern day money would be probably about $700,000, gave it to him as a gift. He was Jewish. It was a Jewish gift to Churchill. They bought him. The price was small because Churchill was by that sum of money bought. He was hired. He became a hired help. The only thing he was asked to do was to realign his gun and point his cannon securely on Nazi Germany. If you look at the events as they really happened, until 1936, he hardly gave Germany a passing mention in his speeches and writings. Other things were more important. From 1936 onwards, he began beating the anti-Nazi, anti-German drum.
What was the motive?
Well, Churchill's got a long and complicated history. I mean, he's somebody who
that was the wryest smile I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, look, I think on one level, there was a sense that Churchill was sort of humiliated by his performance in the First World War.
Yeah.
But then you get into, why was Winston Churchill such a dedicated booster of Zionism from early on in his life, right? And there's ideological reasons. But then as time goes on, you read stories about Churchill going bankrupt and needing money, getting bailed out by people who shared his interests, in terms of Zionism, but also his hostility, I think his hostility to, put it this way, I think his hostility to Germany was real. I don't think that he necessarily had to be bribed to have that feeling. But, I think he was, to an extent, put in place by people, the financiers, by a media complex that wanted to make sure that he was the guy who was representing Britain in that conflict for a reason.
He said that the reason, I mean, I could go on and on with the various things that one other thing that Daryl said was that the people dying in camps after Operation Barbarossa, after the attack on the Soviet Union in 41, I guess it was, died of a kind of catastrophe where they were overwhelmed and they were starving to death, such that a letter was sent from a commandant saying, there's not enough food to go around. It may be more humane to find a fast-acting method to kill them all quickly.
Make the case for that. Okay, so you've made your statement. A lot of people are thinking, well, wait a second. You said Churchill, my childhood hero, the guy with the cigar.
Yeah. Well, and the next thought that comes into their head is that, you're saying Churchill was the chief villain, therefore his enemies, Adolf Hitler and so forth, were
Stalin,
the protagonists, right?
Yeah.
That they're the good guys if you think he's a villain. That's not the case. That's not what I'm saying. Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You have like letters as early as July, August 1941 from commandants of these makeshift camps that they're setting up for these millions of people who are surrendering or people they're rounding up. And so it's 2 months after, a month or two after Barbarossa was launched. And they're writing back to the high command in Berlin saying, we can't feed these people. We don't have the food to feed these people. And one of them actually says, rather than wait for them all to slowly starve this winter, wouldn't it be more humane to just finish them off quickly now?
But what, of course, what Daryl left out of that letter was that the next line was, but either way, humane or not, it would be more pleasant than what we're watching now. And then the next paragraph, it talks about and no matter what we decide, I would suggest we sterilize all the women because that'll take care of the Jewish problem once and for all. So this is so now if I have a relationship with Daryl. There is no way I'm bringing Daryl Cooper on my show to discuss his take on these issues without doing myself or having one of my $1 million a year things. Like, okay, I'm going to have somebody come on now who's really going to have a revisionist view of World War II and the Holocaust, right? Let's make sure we're prepared to push back on this. This is not any topic. This is serious.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do that. Instead, what he said was that I saw that issue with Tucker, and you just care about how war affects people and the psychology of people, and it was a coordinated effort against you.
I saw what happened with you on the Tucker Carlson thing, and I spoke about it almost immediately on the podcast. I've been listening to your podcast for a long time, and it's so charitable and comprehensive and so thorough, and so you put so much weight on the real lives and suffering of human beings on all sides of any conflict. The regular people that didn't want to be dragged into any war, that find themselves on the front line. The stories that you tell and the way you tell them is so comprehensive and so, again, charitable. Like the humanity of these people is so well expressed that your fans know you. I'm a fan. I know you. I know how you view things. I know how you portray things. I know how honest you are about all aspects of conflict. And again, as charitable as possible, the way you lay this out.
I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that so many of these questions have really been made, it's not like they're off limits, like they're illegal and you're going to go to jail if you talk about them. I'm still sitting here. But the attempt is to make it so that you can't be in any kind of respectable society.
Yeah, the attempt is to make you radioactive.
And so it really has like the opposite effect of the one that is at least ostensibly intended,
I think there's a bunch of things going on simultaneously. I think some of this is coordinated. And I think, because I think that with everything now online, I think there's public momentum opinions that aren't necessarily organically shaped.
Never completely whitewashing what was actually said. Now, yes, he has every right to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not say that when Sam was criticizing it, Sam was wrong to criticize it, or that Sam was an anti-free speech figure. Sam's the guy who brought on Charles Murray.
Yeah.
And then brought on Ezra Klein right after to debate it. And Sam delved into it.
But it's more the substance of his criticism, not the fact that he criticized. That's all well and good. But my point is, I got introduced to the Darryl Cooper thing a little late in the game. I watched that whole episode with him and Darryl Cooper, Joe Rogan and Darryl Cooper, to see what all the fuss was about. And one thing was interesting was, first of all,
Mein Kampf can be taken with a grain of salt.
It's stacked against me because Joe's watched clearly a lot of this guy and consumed a lot of his podcasting, and I hadn't. So that also just humbles me a little bit before judging to say, like, if Joe, who I've watched for years and has had on a lot of different range of people, he's had on Barry Weiss and Ben Shapiro and Douglas Murray. He's also had on Roger Waters and Abby Martin pre-October 7th too. People didn't go crazy about it because the temperature wasn't so high as to where it is now. It was, I think, more curiosity driven. But having said that, because he's more familiar with
I think Roger Waters is post October 7th, no?
Not on Rogan, no, pre. And saying a lot of the same stuff, but we didn't have this reaction to it, right? Because we didn't feel like we're in this precarious or fragile situation, but he still had them on.
I react to it.
Go
ahead.
But I'm talking the community as a whole, or whatever, the culture as a whole, especially in the Jewish community and pro-Israel community. But I'm watching this episode, and the way I'm processing it, for one, the fact that Joe's much more familiar with this guest than I am puts me in a position to just judge carefully, because if let's say there's 1,000 episodes, and you probably know better than I do because you are more familiar with Darryl Cooper, like the Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem and these other things that are very sympathetic to Jewish suffering, or all these things.
They're not very sympathetic to Jewish suffering, but go ahead.
I'm making presumptions because I haven't immersed myself in this stuff, but I'm presuming Joe has, and he's coming to the conclusion that you're so obviously not what they're portraying you as. Fine. So I took that with a grain of salt. But my point is, I'm watching this, and my mind goes back to watching lectures of Jordan Peterson in 2015, 2014. And the way Jordan Peterson used to talk about history from a psychoanalytical perspective, you hear him talk about Hitler, you hear him talk about Hitler's preferences, and it was a very humanizing thing, because sometimes the process of talking about history and psychoanalyzing history is to make the case that you think you wouldn't have been a Nazi in those days.
But right. That's fine. That's not the conversation that was had.
No, but on Rogan itself, if you watch it with that in mind, he certainly says things that I think are just false and worth confronting. And the fact, if Joe doesn't have it in his arsenal, or it doesn't come to him to confront Darryl Cooper, I don't know, it feels almost self-defeating to just not confront those ideas and explain why they're wrong. Even if Joe's not equipped to do it, fine, but other people
Nobody's
are.
watching this stuff and consuming it like that, I think. I mean, I think
but it's just a little more complex.
I want to say something. I want to say that it's very important. And Tiana, you ready to play that video in a second?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So listen.
But you're more familiar with Darryl Cooper.
No, not yet. I'll tell you when.
Yeah,
I'll tell you when. All right. So the thing about there's some elements of truth in everything that's being said here. When I was a kid, when in the late 60s and early 70s, mid 70s, when there was an argument that went around about whether or not the rock stars, because they were into drugs, would cause kids to start taking drugs. And, only the squares were concerned about that. And I remember as a kid in high school, my kind of friend group, one of my friends got really into the Grateful Dead all of a sudden. And I wasn't that into the Dead. And our group kind of split up. And all the kids who got into the Grateful Dead got into heavy hallucinogenics. And I remember noting that as a kid, like, oh, they're into the, and I kind of like the Dead music, but I wasn't into the Dead, right? The whole thing. I said, oh, it actually did lead to these kids being all into LSD. My long-winded point is that hipness and cultural cachet do have a power and an effect. And when when Norman Finkelstein says anti-Semitic things, it only goes so far. When the most important, coolest guy in the world,
I want to have a civil conversation.
Yeah. When
you could go.
What's that? When the coolest guy in the world is surrounding himself with, what do I keep hearing? Is she playing something?
It's okay, something played, yeah.
When the coolest guy in the world is surrounding himself with other cool people who all seem to be into this stuff, this filters down in a way which has nothing to do with facts or research or anything else. None of the kids I knew who were taking LSD were looking up the harm, the pluses and minuses of LSD. They say, the Dead likes it, so I like it. Rogan likes these guys. Rogan thinks they're cool. Jake Shields. So this is, I'm disposed to it. And I can't give that a pass. And you can at the same time note there's all this anti-Semitism now that you eloquently put at the beginning of the conversation, and then say, but nobody's done anything wrong.
Do you think there's a difference between a Daryl Cooper and a Jake Shields?
Well, I don't know, because...
Really? Do you think Joe Rogan would have Jake Shields on again?
No, I hope not. But I don't see much. Well, let's start this. I've thought a lot about what you're asking. First of all, Daryl Cooper is 1,000 times more sophisticated, smart, and knowledgeable than Jake Shields.
Right.
I don't see much difference in Ian Carroll and Jake Shields. Do you? You want to split that hair for me?
I can a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah. I mean, Jake Shields is a proud, unapologetic, Jew-hating, anti-Semite, and says it all the time on Twitter and does the worst.
And Ian Carroll?
And Ian Carroll does that whole... It's like a sort of adjacent to it. I would say it's maybe a 1 degree of separate. I mean, they're just not the same exact thing.
Do they need to be the same exact thing? I mean,
in order to slip into Rogan's universe,
dude, let's not. This is, you're upsetting me. Actually, listen. No. Let's not buy the gaslighting of the people who are gaslighting us.
Yes.
We know goddamn well there's not a thing that Jake Shields says that bothers Ian Carroll. The only difference is a marketing decision of how they're going to present themselves. It's a matter of sophistication.
Got some lady, I was in a space, she said something along the lines of, 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. And I was like, oh my God, bro, here we fucking.
I'm just so sick of hearing that, you playing along with something that you just know is bullshit. It came to a point, like, you play along with it for a while because the worst fucking possible thing you could be is a Holocaust denier. It's illegal. You get banned from everything.
Yep.
Can you even deny it on Twitter?
It occurred. We're not going to, it absolutely occurred.
People died.
I'm not denying it. It absolutely occurred. But the way that they tell us about it is questionable.
It's kind of like 40 head babies.
Yes.
2 babies died that day, not 40, and they weren't beheaded. Historians should sit down and try to figure out the truth. And I don't know the exact truth. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know it wasn't 6 million. I know they're full of lies. The whole Holocaust story was based off the Nuremberg trials. Is what they did is they took, I think it was Rudolf Haas, Rudolf Haas.
Hess.
I think it was, there's a Haas and a Hess, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing the last name right, but there's one of them they took, and they tortured them for 3 days. It was 5 Jewish people. This is admitted by the torturers and him, until finally, no sleep, torture. They started threatening to torture his kids too. He finally he signed these papers they gave him and said, "Sure, I gassed 6 million Jews." The entire story was built around this.
Yep. You torture them long enough, they'll tell you anything you want to hear.
Exactly. It took 3 days to break them down, and it was all Jewish people. This is documented.
The Nuremberg trials
story was based off that.
Were a witch hunt.
Elevators to death that go into fire. There's so many absurd stories.
Then you talk about the ovens. It takes like an hour or 2 hours to cremate a body. How would you be able to cremate that many people in the ovens as they claim? Then the gas chambers. They were delousing stations.
No, exactly.
How the fuck were they in a gas chamber when a door opens out?
Well, a lot of the ones
they could walk out.
Well, a lot of the ones too that they say were gas chambers. Well, when the Holocaust happened, when they liberated them all, none of them were active. They were all later. They said, "Oh, these used to be gas chambers." The Soviets reconstructed them. You go to Auschwitz,
chimney.
They reconstructed. They built the chimney later. There's no blue stains on it, which the Zyklon B would put there. They looked for the bodies, found no bodies in the ground. So something happened there, but why is there no gas chambers?
Hitler's speech is in English. Yeah. I was like, oh, this dude's probably racist as shit. He's probably going to say the N-word every...
No.
Right now, I was like, oh my God.
He's just very pro-Germany.
He's pro.
TikTok is all over those videos right now. TikTok is eating that shit up. And that's the thing about this. I think that all of this is circling around this transformation that's happening from controlled information to open information. And so the Holocaust is a good example of one where it's I don't think that the Holocaust did not happen. Right. So to be clear, what I'm saying is something happened for sure. Right. But I know that the narratives around the Holocaust that I was taught in school, they were forged in the era of controlled information. But in reality, Nazi Germany came out of the post-World War I German era, right? And that post-World War I Germany was specifically created by the international banking cartel when they had after World War I, the Treaty of Versailles, I believe it was called, is when they basically determined what Germany was going to owe, trillions of marks, and they're going to have to repay all this debt. They basically turned Germany into an economic slave state. And the whole world had business relationships. Everyone else all around the world was funding them. And those death camps, those camps in Germany, they were slave labor camps. And all of the companies, just like our prison labor system in America right now, where McDonald's and Starbucks and Verizon are using prisoners to do labor for 7 cents an hour or whatever it is, that's what was happening in Germany in that pre-World War, pre and during World War II, is all of our American and European and British, all these other corporations, these multinational corporations, were building the camps for the work that they were using to produce the products that they were selling. And it was not just a German operation. Ottomans, it was during World War I, is they made a bunch of different deals of we need to win this war, and if you help us, we'll give you, But
then they didn't do the money, so they also promised it to the Rothschilds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it gets. I've tried figuring out how it started, and I guess the Rothschilds. That's what it doesn't.
I try not to go overbearing on everybody has to be Jewish.
It's just that will make you not.
Yeah, it's unhealthy.
Jake Shields and Ian Carroll retweet each other, go on each other's podcasts.
Right.
They add to each other's anti-Semitic tweets. There is zero difference between them in terms of there's nothing that Jake Shields would ever say that Ian Carroll will say, dude, that's wrong. You shouldn't say that.
That's all fair.
And there's nothing that Dan Bilzerian will say. And Dan Bilzerian,
I'm not going to cut them any fucking slack. They are overrepresented in every single fucking category. They're crushing it across the board. And not just a little bit. I mean, I'm talking about 3,500% overrepresented in categories. And we're talking about government, we're talking about banks, we're talking about media, we're talking about Hollywood, we're talking about all the important positions in America. They're massively overrepresented.
And you said on Patrick Bet-David's podcast as well, they play the victim card so effing much about Jewish people. I mean, do you not understand why Jewish people might feel a sense of victimhood, given that 6 million of them were killed in World War II by a genocidal monster in the Holocaust? Do you not understand why that might make Jewish people feel that, yes, they have indeed been victims?
Yeah, I mean, that figure's been revised, but, I believe that Jewish supremacy is the greatest threat to America. And I think it's the greatest threat to the world today. I truly believe that.
There's a clip of Ian Carroll saying, blah, 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 the Holocaust, whatever that was.
And it's like, and that's not the point. The point is not that like all Jewish people are in on this thing. The point is that like, is that Jewish people are susceptible to being approached by this organization. And and we need to support the Jewish people that reject it. Like we need to
encourage them to be on our side. So I think these people that are, Jews bad, they're a big problem.
Exactly.
Because we need to bring Jews to our side, not push them away, not be like, you're a Jew.
We need to heal. We don't need to like create more divides. Because the last thing we need is to create another Holocaust of sorts, whatever that was. Like we don't need to like, and I don't mean that flippantly. Like any death is death. I'm just saying that like you don't.
And then they all start laughing.
100%.
So
look, if we're just trying to be precise,
no, not precise is in reality, not in
precise,
not accepting their
100%. So
Trojan horse of it
in the tactics that they use, say right, like in the spectrum of all this, they're very close together. Ian Carroll. It just, as a matter of fact, doesn't tweet a picture of a Jew with a hook nose and say, "Watch out." He doesn't do. He does other things that are nefarious and bad. But Jake Shields does that.
But you don't think Rogan should have Jake Shields on?
Absolutely not.
But you think Ian Carroll somehow passes the test?
No, Ian Carroll was the moment where we go, "Oh God, there's real trouble in the water here." That the alarm bells go off, because I think what attracts Joe, if I'm trying to be impartial, but given Joe's history and his credibility with the audience, right, and the goodwill he's built up over the years, I think with his audience, Ian Carroll gets on the show, and where is the Venn diagram that attracts Joe to Ian? I think it's conspiracy, because Joe's always...
With all of them.
What? No, but I'm saying Joe has always been attracted to conspiracy theories in general, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's moon landing, JFK, all that kind of stuff.
You're restating my introduction.
Right. So Ian Carroll gets on the show. They spend most of the time talking about conspiracies. In the last 5 minutes or whatever, he brings up the Epstein stuff. Now, I'm not trying to give a pass. I'm just trying to understand how that could slip through the cracks.
No, if you want to measure in...
I don't think Jake Shields, there's any way you could look past it or see any other way. I don't think Joe would have Candace on either. I don't think he'd have Candace on again either.
Okay, so let's play this clip. Hold on, play this clip. And you tell me what you see this.
Sure.
I mean, look, if the media was just driven by ratings, they'd be doing shows on Jeffrey Epstein every day.
Every day.
I mean, because you'd be the number one show in cable news.
Exactly.
You could go, I'm going to talk about no other topic. Give me the 8 p.m. hour on MSNBC or CNN or Fox News or whatever, and I'll say, I'm just going to make my show about Jeffrey Epstein. That's every single day, that's all we're doing. I guarantee you I'd have the number one show in cable news.
Right.
More people would want to watch
the
that.
Candace Owens show. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right. And it's doing better numbers than any of the shows on cable news.
It's phenomenal. It's like they created a monster with her when they fired her from the Daily Wire. They created a monster.
Yeah, they sure did.
She can't be stopped.
Yeah. Oh no. There's no stopping Candace Owens at this
she's
point.
hitting all the fucking third rails that no one wants to touch. She's got a 6-hour presentation on how Bridget Macron is a man. I mean, it's fucking 6 hours plus long.
First of all, just to imagine, if somebody said, I don't know what the equivalent things what Candace Owens has been saying about Jews, about black people, these fucking N-word apes, so like the worst of the worst, because she's saying the worst of the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And then that person had a show, and it's like, could you imagine me yucking it up? That person's awesome. She's killing it. This person who's saying things about, the things that essentially a KKK, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So. Number one, I want you to explain that. And number two, and they said, and she's touching all the third rails.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they mentioned Bridget Macron, but that's not a third rail. Nobody gives a shit about whether Bridget Macron is a man. We all know the third rails that she's touching, and they're yucking it up about it.
Right.
Now, tell me, what the fuck am I missing here? Do you want to say that the bubble over both those guys' heads during that conversation is not a reel of the outrageous stuff she's been saying about Jews?
Then we have Dr. Joel Finkelstein, who is Jewish. We have Jacob Zucker, who is Jewish. We have Danit Sarah Finkelstein, who is Jewish. We have Sonia Yanofsky, who is Jewish. We have Alex Goldenberg, who is Jewish. We have Ohad Fadida, who is Jewish. We have Gideon Furher, who we checked, and he is Jewish. We have Simon Lazarus, who is Jewish.
Catholics and Christians were going missing on Passover, and then they would find bodies, across Europe, and they were able to trace them back to Jews. Blood libel. They weren't Jews, These were Frankists. This Frankist cult, which is masquerading behind Jews, still participates in this shit to this day, Okay. Why would you want, as a small nation that is the size of New Jersey, okay, why would you want the pedophiles to flee there?
Actually,
what do they mean by third rail?
What they, I think, are unpacking in that clip and kibitzing and laughing about is that Candace Owens has been embarking on this strategy campaign of provocation.
But they don't say it's disgusting what she's doing.
True, but I'll finish.
Shouldn't
Let
they?
me finish the point. She's doing this thing where she's poking this beast, this provocation.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And what's amusing them, or
it's amusing them. Yes.
What's amusing to them is, I think the thing
they have a right to be amused by it. I'm not fucking amused by it. Are you?
No, but I think that the way we react to it and being reactionary plays into her hands
Dude,
as well.
we can strategize our reaction in a second.
Yeah.
Let's agree on the reality of it first, and then we can decide how we want to react to it. And what I'm seeing all around is nobody wants to listen. I'm taking it out on you because I'm ready to cancel the fucking podcast and go off Twitter because I've had this conversation with 10 other prominent Jewish intellectuals.
Yes.
All the people who came out against Tucker.
Yes.
They will not hand this. This is their third. They do not want to risk this.
What?
Nobody has more to lose than I do by risking this.
They don't want to risk what? Can you clarify that?
In other words, they don't want to say what I'm saying. Like, yes, this is a problem. Of course, Joe has every right to say it. Joe is not an anti-Semite.
Right.
Joe may not even realize.
I just want Joe to like me, Noam, okay?
Well, you know what?
I just want him to like me,
yes,
okay?
That may be the case.
No, I'm weighing. First of all, look, I'm weighing a few things
They're
here.
laughing and saying awesome about a woman who is touching the third rails of saying that Jews are slaughtering Christian babies at Passover, that Herzl was not Jewish, that Lyndon Johnson was Jewish,
I get it.
that Stalin was Jewish, that Mengele was the Mengele experiments were propaganda.
Absolutely.
She plays Count the Jew. I mean, how
I'm not saying to not be non-judgmental
Dude,
about it. I've gone
hold
after
on.
Dave Smith
Hold
for
on,
this
hold
reason.
on.
Yeah, I can answer you.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have counter-probing. Counter-program. Go ahead. You have the mic.
The Dave Smith behavior that I don't think is so forgivable or debatable or challengeable in the sense on the marketplace of ideas because it doesn't belong there is his flippancy and his cozying up to some of the worst figures online saying...
Why are you segregating out Dave Smith?
Just because he's in this clip and talking about it.
But you mean just him or both of them?
Well, now Joe is kind of going into that lane, but Dave has been doing it. I'm going on Dave for a second because he's the guest, so that's why this is coming up, because he brought up the point and Joe was reacting to it. But I think I'm saying what you would agree with is that what he's been doing is saying these guys aren't so bad. What Israel's doing is a disaster, but everybody else is just like providing cover for all these people in the sense that he will not call out anti-Semitism where it stares him in the face. And when people like us and anyone is screaming the barbarians are at the gates, whether it's about foreign policy or all these other debates, he's the one saying, stop, they're not at the gates. You're causing the barbarians to be at the gates. Then when they break through the gates, his arguments become unfalsifiable because he gets to say, I told you so. And we're like, no, we told you so. And you tried to make everybody feel like it's not a big deal. These are just some trolls on Twitter. And so I've gone after him for that. In Joe's case, I have to think about this for a second because I remember a time when Jordan Peterson used to go on Rogan, right? Who I'm a big fan of. Mm-hmm. And the woke left used to say, once again, Joe platforms transphobe, misogynist, hateful, bigot Jordan Peterson because he said the words enforced monogamy in an article. And they misrepresented the crap out of Jordan Peterson on his show. And they barely consumed the content or watched the show. And they came to these judgment conclusions.
Am I misrepresenting the crap out of somebody?
What's that?
Am I misrepresenting the crap out of somebody? Because I hope not.
No, but I think...
Am I misrepresenting in any way?
No,
anything?
I think some of the emotions are high on this subject, and in some cases...
but you're making a good point.
Yes.
If it's analogous, if I'm misrepresenting, then by all means.
What I mean is why I'm like looking... Why it's presenting like I'm giving Joe a pass is because for so long... in a lot of these domains and having these conversations, it was the woke left coming after him for having ideas and conversations about race, about culture, about these things, and completely misrepresenting. And I don't want to fall into that same trap. So I'm trying to be a little discerning, given how much value, let's be honest, Joe has provided to not just the comedy community, but to the culture, to the world of free speech and ideas in a world that we just came out of in 2024 of oppressing ideas, silencing speech we disagree with. That was the tactic of the left.
I'm such a fucking madman. I am not a Joe Rogan hater.
Yeah.
I'm so crazy. My mother could be doing this stuff and I'd be out there blasting it.
Yes.
Because this is not.
But I just have to finish.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to wrap up what I'm saying here. When I look at that and I see them making light of it, it's very concerning, but it also is informative. This is where the chips have fallen in this conversation. Over the course of the 18 months, there's a movable middle. There's the people who celebrated October 7th, right? Or were apathetic to it and took the side of barbarians. I can't move them. They are where they are. The left-wing anti-Zionists, anti-Semites hate Israel because it's better and because it's virtuous. So me flaunting the merits of Israel or Jews, it's not going to move them because they hate merit and they hate virtue. So not them. The far right.
I don't even think you're right about that, but go ahead.
On the far left, in the Marxist
that would not
community,
be my read on their psychology.
Hating, whatever.
I don't want to. I just don't want.
There's people you can't move, okay? And they partner with the radical Islamist ideologies that want to tear down the West, so they're going to hate a Western representation in the Middle East, and all those things. If you're a bigot on the woke, what we deem now as the woke right, far right, and you just hate Jews and blame them for every problem, and you're bitter and resentful, and you scapegoat Jews for everything, can't move you. There's a movable middle, and then there's this spectrum of ideas here that are being peddled out there. When I see them making light of that, or when I see Bill Burr in his new special make a joke about human shields, and it gets a laugh, I can say to myself, fuck you, Bill Burr. Do better. Terrible joke. Or I could say,
I got to tell you the difference.
Well, I just want to finish.
Go ahead.
I use this also to, rather than just cast aspersions or judge it, to say, maybe there's a better tactic and strategies that when we're confronted with these repugnant ideas, we're strong enough as a community. We're strong enough to advocate for better ideas, debunk these silly, stupid claims. If you've been watching Schultz make rounds on the podcast, he takes a different approach. And all of a sudden he's on PBD. He goes, isn't it more likely that America controls Israel, being that they're so much more militarily powerful? And everyone goes, oh.
Okay.
And that's a quick nudge. He didn't call anybody names, and he
enough,
just did that. Yes. So I don't know. Am I disappointing you?
No. What was the thing you said right before? Right before you just said about Andrew Schultz.
That it's data. It's informative. When I watch them have this conversation as to where the arguments have fallen, and then I said, with regard to that it's informative when I see this kind of when I think, and I'm trying to figure out a better way to react to it and respond to it.
Well, in any case, look,
yes,
we're all Jews here. Mm-hmm. But I do want to make the point, the caveat that I have many of these same feelings before October 7th with regard to other people and other issues.
Yeah.
Because truth is absolutely important.
Mm-hmm.
But as Jews here, if we're not for ourselves, then who?
Mm-hmm.
If not now, when? I am fighting for my people based on what I regard as truth.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm wrong, somebody has to tell me where I'm wrong. But if I'm right, then all these comparisons to dishonorable actors are not an argument against what I'm saying. Now, Bill Burr makes a joke about human shields, and this is a very important point.
Yep.
Israel is debatable. It is absolutely, I don't agree with Bill Burr, but it's actually absolutely debatable, and I'm sure it's debated within the war cabinet. It's actually a part of international law, which is how many civilians are we going to kill, even if they're human shields, as compared to what are we going to get strategically for it? What is the price to pay?
Mm-hmm.
And Bill Burr thinks that Israel's out to lunch. They're killing way too many civilians for that thing. Now, there's no right or wrong answer to that, but people have to draw a line somewhere, and Bill Burr is criticizing Israel. Fine. You could make the argument. I made the argument on day one. Listen, one thing Israel might consider is doing nothing after October 7th. Remember I said that? I said, if Israel did nothing, I would not criticize them. Because these are all debatable points. But unless you are post-truth, this is not what Candace Owens, Jake Shields, and these other idiots are discussing. What they will do is when you complain about what they're saying, they will then say, oh, you don't like criticism of Israel, and don't play into their hands. No, you can criticize Israel all you want, although you, of course, you should have a responsible debate about it. You're denying the Holocaust. You're saying that the protocols of the elders of Zion are true, that the Jews are pulling the strings behind all global wars in the last 1,000 years, that Jews kill Christian babies at Passover.
You're preaching to the choir on that.
Now,
I get it.
This is not debatable stuff. It's stuff you have a right to say, but we should not be impotent about saying no. If you're trafficking in these ideas, or lending comfort and imprimatur and reputational cachet and hipness and chumminess to the people who are engaging this stuff, you are lining up with evil in this world.
So,
and to tell me that, well, yeah, you could say that, but you could have said that about this, and that's what they said about Jordan Peterson. You're dragging me into this briar patch. I don't know how to respond.
Well, you're conflating. My judgment of Joe is slightly.
You're setting up a hall of mirrors where we don't know what's true and what's not true anymore.
No. We were talking about Joe or Dave Smith, and I judged Dave Smith a little more harshly given his pattern of chumminess with these worst actors. I don't think you'd ever see Joe go on Jake Shields or Fuentes or all these people and have them on and have this kibbutzy conversation. But there are intersections where Dave Smith and Joe have a rapport, and he can channel some of that. And the Daryl Cooper, there's that Venn diagram. Now, Ian Carroll was the biggest one of concern for me. That's where I went, oh my God, like I'm drawing a line here and I'm going to criticize it. But I think if you want to move somebody back to your side or be more sympathetic to our cause, our side, our people, I don't know if the way to do it is to cast aspersions and rush to judgment.
Aspersions? I'm casting criticism is not aspersion.
Criticism is not, but rushing to judgment. Or I see people on Twitter. We all knew it. Joe's an anti-Semite. We've known all along. You're not doing that.
I'm not doing that. And Sam didn't do that.
Yeah, but like you said before, like close cousins, the elixir, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He's interpreting. He might be lumping in the. You have to be, I think, just nuanced and careful with criticism to know that it's coming from a place of good faith and coming from not the same place as people who are just willing to jump to conclusions and start saying we all knew Joe was just an anti-Semite all along. I don't think that's the way to move the middle or make the case back, because
what you're doing is
if this was Joe's first episode, it'd be a little bit different. But there's been a lot to judge here.
You're setting up a straw man that I agree with you on.
Yes,
which was not my argument, but yes, I agree. And
no, but I'm critical of it too. Them kibitzing about that stuff is very troubling. It's messed up. It's totally messed up. But
I've been
then
saying,
what do we do from there?
My mantra has been for a while now: this stuff is not going to stop itself.
Right.
And every cowardly Jew who is rationalizing it all, and they've been doing it for a long time now, is saying, right this way.
No. Isn't it more cowardly not to speak out and say, here's why all this is bullshit, and say it?
I'm saying that you...
Like I have a friend.
I said everything.
I had a friend of mine. Shout out Cam Higbee. He's a PragerU personality guy. But USS Liberty kept going around. USS Liberty. You're about USS Liberty. It's so tiresome and ridiculous. But he just actually made a really in-depth video debunking the whole thing.
Except that Dennis Prager thinks it's true.
Well, that they did attack it.
No, Dennis Prager thinks it was attacked and that it was a conspiracy between America and Israel to keep it silent.
Is Dennis Prager an anti-Semite?
No, he's Prager. No, he's not. No, that's what I'm saying.
But I'm just saying,
Israel is.
But it provided a lot more context. I mean, a video like that to me is much more potent and powerful in the audience that this is fighting for, because you're saying it's really weird, this is troubling and resonating. Okay. What are you going to do about it? Do we go into our silos and raise our middle fingers? It depends on who. I raise my middle finger to Jake Shields, Jackson Hinkle. If I put them all in one box, it's a little hard to know. Take me seriously.
Okay, Ami.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Did you see?
Are we not agreeing on that?
Sort of. Did you see when I went on Twitter when I was pressing Daryl Cooper for his sources?
Yes.
I got back a deluge of what can only be called Nazi-like anti-Semitic tweets.
Twitter's the Third Reich.
Aimed at me.
Absolutely.
Well, but there's a ratio. It wasn't like a bunch of his people were taking issue with me, people were making arguments, and a certain number of anti-Semitic crazies.
No,
it was basically all anti-Semitic crazies.
Damn broke, and there it was.
Now, this belies the case that we're making for Daryl Cooper, because somehow, while we're seeing the best of him, best in him, and the best in him exists, we are shills if we don't also acknowledge, but we have to admit, he's cultivated a seething neo-Nazi-like audience, and he kind of signals to them every so often with a tweet that sometimes he takes down, saying the Third Reich was preferable to this. Guten Morgen with a Nazi mug, and various Arthur Kwan Lee. He says the great Arthur Kwan Lee, the artist who did his thing. But then we played.
But there's a deeper, more unknown satanic spirituality that normalizes antinatalism, duplicitous sexual abnormalities, communism for the uninitiated, pedophilia, and the sacrificing of God's non-chosen cattle. And those practitioners worship at the altar of the synagogue of Satan, because Talmudic Judaism is a stepping stone towards Satanism.
Again, you'd think that Daryl, if he was who we like to think he was, would say, you know what? I don't need fucking Nazi bigots in my life. My life is hard enough already making these difficult arguments to try to get people to see a different side of the German people. What do I need right by my side? A fucking guy who's saying that Judaism is a satanic religion and responsible for all the evil in the world.
100%.
But he does have him right by his side. But he does. Now,
it doesn't help that he looks like an SS guard. That's just the vibe.
No, but dude, no, this is very serious.
No, I get it.
And this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of manning up. Because no matter what you can say and point to that Daryl Cooper has said, which is mitigating, the fact is his actions speak louder than his words. If you have your arm around the worst kind of anti-Semite there is, and you big up him on Twitter, then maybe you're full of shit and very sophisticated when you say these other things that people can hang their hats on when they want to forgive you.
I've been thinking about this a lot. Do you think there's a difference between...
You need to think longer and harder about it.
Do you think there's a difference...
Come back.
Do you think there's a difference between judging someone who's the messenger versus the message, and that somebody could be out there putting messages out that stoke a lot of anti-Semitism?
Who's the worst anti-black hater there is?
Hold on, provide a lot of red meat for anti-Semites. What I told Candace in our second conversation was like, just for the sake of the conversation, for it to go somewhere, I was like, look, you can tell me all day long you don't hate Jews in here, in your heart. I don't know what's going on in here with you. I don't know what's going on here with you. And we waste a lot of time and energy trying to prove that. But that's irrelevant, because the things you're saying, the ideas you're perpetuating, are providing red meat and stoking the flames of anti-Semitism all over the place. And the fact that you're not even aware of these tropes, you may claim ignorance, and you think you're coming up to these revelations of Jews disappearing, of Christians disappearing on Passover, as if you first discovered it. You're revealing your profound ignorance at best and hatred at worst.
You believe her?
What's that?
You believe she's actually...
I said profound ignorance at best, or hatred
but
at
ask
worst.
What you think.
About her?
Yeah.
Oh, I think Candace is motivated mostly a lot by a creature of provocation, loyalty, clicks, and using anti-Semitism as a way to elevate herself.
All right. So anyway,
having been familiar with a lot of the tactics and things.
If you were to,
I'm not excusing it if you want my honest analysis, but there is some Jew hatred there, but it's more about
there's a problem
using it.
There was a problem. There was a
for
problem with our people.
Talk to me,
because I don't know who the worst anti-black, let's take George Wallace or let's say some legendary black hater, because that's kind of what Candace is emulating. And I had them, buddy. I called them great. They were an artist. I used their artwork as my logo. All my followers love the person. And then I said something, black people were treated very, very badly in slavery. I think it's terrible. I think it's terrible what happened to black people in slavery. I can even, my voice catches when I discuss the passage and what the black people on the ship had to deal with. And people said, no, you don't understand Noam. You don't look at, didn't you hear him? He said he cares about black people. And who I wouldn't kid. Nobody would be fooled.
Yes.
And you know who would be the first people to tell me I'm full of shit? The Jews.
Did you just generalize?
You wouldn't buy this argument for 5 seconds if it wasn't about someone accused of anti-Semitism. It's out in front. It's clear. If I put on that kind of racist person on my show or person like that, you would be saying, oh, no, it's a marketplace of ideas. So what?
That's not what I said.
So
with
what if
regards
he's
to
yucking
Candace.
it up with people who think it's awesome that he's touching the third rails of black inferiority?
You asked me what I think deep down. I honestly believe deeply motivates Candace psychologically. I was just giving my honest assessment, having seen her behavior and pattern of behavior. I think I attributed a lot to basically this phrase, which is years ago, Kanye tweeted, "I like the way Candace Owens thinks." That gave her a big escalation in the profile, and now today she likes the way Kanye West thinks.
Let me.
And therefore, it's this.
Let me.
A lot of it's a clout chase where it's like, look what I can use here to elevate my profile. But whatever, I'm not making.
We got to wrap it up.
I'm not making an excuse for the anti-Semitism.
I'm excuses for all of them. I'm going to give you the final shot into the exhaust chute in the Death Star.
Mm-hmm.
I like this analogy very often because I think very often with a lot of big arguments, actually, there's a few small arguments that blow up the whole thing. All Joe Rogan would have to do is go out there and say, I think what Candace Owens is saying is disgusting. That's all. I like to have conversations. I think what Jake Shields is saying, I just want to let my audience say, there's a lot of talk about me. I just want to let you guys know.
Yeah.
I think that when they say this, and that, and it's about how that Jake Shields, believe me, I'm embarrassed that I was ever associated with these people. Don't for a second think that I have any sympathy for these people. I think these are anti-Semites. And then he can go on with every fucking conversation he wants. And let's bet money whether he'll do it or not.
I think that I agree would go a very long way.
All he has to do.
All of that stuff would go a long way.
Just say
Because
it.
when you play near the edge, it's important to draw the line and say, well, I'm not over there, as opposed to saying, when you're playing in these territories, especially, he did say at one point, no, it just seems like, man, there's all this anti-Semitism. I remember early on.
Yes, he
October
said it
7th,
recently.
and he said it, but then he goes, but man, it's just like, it's clearly just overreacting. And as I said in the beginning, we're not overreacting. We are reacting because we're not pretending it's not there. Just even though people pretended it wasn't there, it was there when it wasn't, doesn't mean when it is there, it isn't.
The overreacting also can be debatable.
Yeah.
And we don't know if we're overreacting.
Well, look.
But I'm saying that all he has to do to really solve much of this problem is just get out from behind this ambiguity that he's created.
Yes.
The same thing with Dave Smith.
Yes.
I mean, how?
But I will just tell you this.
Dave Smith will go on Twitter and say, Candace Owens is a truth teller. She's a truth eater. She's brave. Now,
she's coming into some other stuff I don't agree with, but yeah.
No. So she's awesome. Like, they have nothing but praise for her.
You won't see Joe do that much.
Let me find one word of saying, but you know what? I mean, like we say, I just want to be clear. She's touching on third rails. I mean the Macron stuff. The stuff she's saying about the blood libel stuff, I want no part of that.
Yeah.
Why?
It's always softballing and making things digestible. Things like, look, all that other stuff, the horrible stuff, he'll never say and designate as horrible. It's just other stuff. I've seen him be very soft language on that kind of thing.
The man becomes Clarence Darrow when somebody tries to defend the vaccine.
I'll say something you'll agree with, I think, which is look, I think as much as I've been saying that I think it comes from a place of strength, not weakness, to rather than just harshly judge and call names or smear, but actually step into the arena and debate these things. It's also a very sad thing that we have to. You would never tell a black person, all this white supremacy is on the rise, but you should just go out there and prove why you're not racially inferior, because you're not. Don't let those ideas become dominant. No, it's the white supremacists who need to shut up and be silenced in a sense we don't have to engage and grant them a response and dignify them with a response as to why these old ideas of eugenics or whatever should be brought back to the fold. It's a sad state of affairs that we have to do that as Jews and sort of say, prove you're not the bad guy. I don't like that posture. It's a sad state of affairs that we find ourselves in. But then you have to go from there. And I think post-October 7th, I was like, hey, if you're not on our side here, screw you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. If you can't see that we are the morally superior position here and as far as being attacked, I don't really, I can't redeem you, can't save, I'm not interested. And I was very much into the echo chamber of that just for the chizuk and the strength of needing to be. But now 18 months in, all of a sudden finding that mainstream platforms like Rogan, like the podcast space, which I used to really celebrate as places where people can be free to discuss ideas and we're on the right side of a lot of issues, when I find them being swayed on the wrong side of a lot of issues, I can decide to sort of do the quote woke thing. I hate of just criticizing and calling them names, or I can, I think do you have a better shot at making Joe more sympathetic to what we're saying, or less sympathetic based on what you're trying to do? My point is, if you want somebody to actually say those things that you're saying, it's better to give a benefit of the doubt. And
I gave the benefit of the doubt, but why would he not be more sympathetic based on what I'm saying? What did I say?
Because I think people don't like to be told what to do, even if it's the right position to take.
All right. Well,
you know what I'm saying? Every time you tried it with Dave Smith, as obvious as it is for him to just say these people, Dan Bilzerian, Jake Shields are the worst people, you're right. But the fact that you take a position to demand he say something is where he's just averse to doing it. And I think that's
how do you think he looked?
Bad. I don't think it.
Do you think that contributes to convincing the middle ground that you're speaking about when they see the guy when someone sees an opponent in debate taking an untenable position?
Yeah,
I think that's the most persuasive you can ever be.
Who's being untenable?
Dave, I think, began to look ridiculous when he sees this video of Candace, that video of Candace, and that video of Candace. I think Darryl Cooper found himself in the same situation as well.
But you don't want to be giving into the caricature that, look, I think Jewish organizations for a long time, especially on the left, made all these demands and took this position of demanding people comply with certain things and standards. And that can turn a lot of people off, even if the ideas and the aims are good and the intentions are good. So demanding Dave do something rather than pointing out, I think there's a slight difference in that flavor that makes it a lot more digestible for the masses. Even though to me and to you, it looks ridiculous. To a lot of people, it looks like, man, why are they all trying to just demand everybody condemn this anti-Semitism and that anti-Semitism, rather than just sticking to proving what's true and what's not true? To me, proving what's true and what's not true is far more persuasive for the likes of Joe Rogan, for the likes of these audiences that they have that are massive.
No, this is where you're 100% wrong.
You think so? 100%?
Yes, I'll tell you why. Because what conspiracy theories are, as opposed to an argument about vaccines, are trying to prove a negative.
Yes.
You can eventually, through double-blind experimentation and data, get to the end of an argument on polio or the vaccines or whatever it is, and I guess maybe there could still be some disagreement within that, but at least it is not it's something that can be proven. Peer-reviewed, scientific studies. A drug has to prove its efficacy. I cannot prove that that Christian babies are not disappearing on Passover.
Well,
I cannot prove that Israel is not a nation of pedophiles.
It's unfalsifiable because it's a conspiracy theory.
I cannot prove.
I agree.
Disprove any of the things that Jake Shields says, any of the things that Candace Owens says, anything.
But what you can demonstrate is that rather than gathering data and being curious and then drawing conclusions, what they are doing is drawing conclusions and then gathering data and evidence to support it.
But what I can say,
you can point that out.
What I can say to somebody who purports to be a member of the civilized world, I can say to them, listen, you're playing footsie with these people. Do you believe what they're saying or not? Go on record. If you want to go on record and say, yeah, you know what? I think what Candace is saying could be true. Fine. You still have your show. I would not even. I would defend you against anybody who would try to argue that Spotify should pull your contract. I don't. It's not about deplatforming. But go on record. You believe it or not? That's all. I want to know, Dave. You believe this or not? You don't believe it? Then why are you big upping her? Should I infer from that you don't believe it, but you think it's harmless, gossip stuff? It has no effect in the real world. It's like believing, I don't know, something, I can't think of something like that Paul is dead, like some dumb.
Yeah.
Like, this is serious stuff to us. You don't think it's serious? Go on, fine, say you don't think it's serious.
He does. Dave a lot of times says, I don't think it's that big a deal.
But stop with.
And that's the problem.
Stop with, no, but he won't say that whether he thinks it's anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. He won't say. He'll say to Nick Fuentes, I don't think you hate Jews.
Dude, I'm with you on that. That's to me where the biggest moral failing on his behavior has been, and posturing in this past. It's not just the where I think he's wrong on Israel. I mean, that's kind of fair game. The other stuff is not so forgivable because when you're playing in this arena and then you provide this sort of kind of coverage by saying, I'm the cool Jew that's going to cozy up to these people and make them digestible. I mean, you have to be responsible for that. I get
it. It is time to cry alarm. Tucker Carlson is fully in this camp.
By my friend Candace Owens, she was one of the nicest people I've ever met, actually.
She's
very
incredible.
smart.
She's incredible.
She and everyone's always, Candace Owens a hater. Candace Owens is the opposite of a hater, but she's a very kind person. But
Tucker Carlson is text messaging with the president on a daily basis. If our 78-year-old president should die, J.D. Vance will have Tucker Carlson by his side. J.D. Vance has talked complimentarily about Alex Jones.
The more you attack Israel, the stronger it gets, because the cult that runs it manipulates and controls the white supremacists and all the groups that then come in, not all of them. So there's a bigger dialectic here, and there's good people in Israel too.
Alex Jones just last week said, don't criticize Israel, it only encourages the demon-like cult that runs the place. Like,
oh my God, he really said that? No, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
So
that is unbelievable.
This is an entity. It's all connected at the hip.
Yeah,
and it seems like you're finding every reason to avoid conflict.
Me?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Well,
I debated Dave on Candace Owens.
All right.
I went on the show and risked looking really bad, but I went into the Lion's Den and debated him and Candace 3 times called her out for it. But I think it's more constructive to do that in some cases than to just write an article or make ourselves feel virtuous and good about it.
It's not working.
I also think that Joe is just is not Tucker Carlson. I don't think they're the same animal.
I don't think he is either.
Right. And I'm not giving a pass. I'm just looking at what I'm looking at and giving you.
In a way, that's worse. I don't think he is either. But every moment that he shows that he doesn't have the reflex to separate himself from these people, then I have to say to myself, because I'm not a mindless person, he doesn't appear like I don't want to, but something's going on here, because most other people would make sure to their audience, don't think like Phil Donahue used to have on Grand Master of the KKK.
Sure.
Nobody ever thought Phil Donahue might be sympathetic to the Grand Master of the KKK.
Right.
This is different.
Do you think that there's a reaction to Joe from our side that's not constructive and not productive?
Some people, yeah.
What would that look like?
Well,
to
calling
you?
him an anti-Semite,
yeah,
and calling for him to be deplatformed, taking off Twitter, taking off Spotify.
But then I could look at you and say, that's just cowardly not to call for that. How could you say that? He's out there kibitzing with these guys and rubbing feet, deplatforming.
Because
just to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, because we also at the same time have competing principles that we believe that free people have a right to say whatever they want. So as much as I wouldn't mind that, Candace Owens, her power is cut to her apartment. She can't, I'm trying to think of somebody lightning struck and she can no longer broadcast. I'd be happy. That'd be a happy outcome. I understand.
Well, Zionists control the weather.
I understand. She has a right to do this, and I have to defend her right to do this.
Yeah.
I have to defend everybody's right to do it.
Right. So I don't really think we're disagreeing much at all.
Oh, we're disagreeing very much, because their right to do it has nothing to do with our responsibility to fight them.
Sure, but what is the substance of that criticism and that fight? What is the substance of that judgmental position?
We went through the whole thing.
What?
We went through the whole
thing.
thing.
We went through it. I just don't see where there's that much difference. I think I'm putting these people on the spectrum of the worst anti-Semites over here and the movable middle.
Listen, you're very concerned with intent.
Yes.
And intent
absolutely.
Intent is very much important when it comes to punishment. Intent is not so important when it comes to results, meaning that if Tylenol is selling poison pills, whether they intended to do it or not is really doesn't matter in terms of our 5-alarm fire of having to deal with it. As a matter of fact, we deal with it in an identical way.
Sure. But that's a very precise binary thing. It's a poison pill that causes immediate harm.
Yes.
A conversation with sloppy points made is a little bit different.
When we're seeing this stuff being disseminated from the most important show in the world, when you're seeing a super spreader, as Sam Harris says, unless you think that, what Ian Carroll said is not misinformation, a super spreader.
I made 2 videos calling it out precisely.
Of misinformation. Yes, it's important for us to know as we're taking the taking the measure of the man, whether it was intentional or not, whether it's naive, ignorant, whatever it is. That matters for that conversation. It matters not for our reaction to the harm it is, to the danger of it. The danger of it is identical. Right. If Joe Rogan's show becomes a conduit for these poison pills, then we have to react to the poison, not to the intention.
But if next week, I remember when he had someone on, maybe it was Kurt Metzger or something, and Joe was like, this was Israel related. He's like, it just kind of looks like a genocide. Just kind of looks like that. And everybody wanted to jump on and say, we all knew it. Joe's showing his true cards. The next week he had Coleman Hughes on, and he said, I appreciate your perspective. That's really interesting.
Well, no, actually, that's not what happened.
What's not?
So first of all, let's say again.
Yes.
He can. I'm not talking about calling it genocide. As much as that infuriates me.
Yes.
That is.
I used that example because that was the example.
That is a debatable position.
Right.
But, and I know Kurt Metzger very well. We're friends. And then the next week, Coleman went on, and Coleman crowbarred his comment about Israel, and Joe's answer was not. Wasn't appreciate your perspective. I think it was more like, well, I guess I don't know that much about it.
He said, I appreciate your perspective.
What's unique about this war, unlike every other war that I could think of, is you have an army in Hamas that has perfected the art of embedding itself, enmeshing itself with civilians so that you cannot hit them without hitting the people around them. Other armies have done this, but none have perfected it to the extent that Hamas has. No army that I know of in military history has had 15 years to build 300 miles of tunnel underneath a city that they don't use to shelter the civilians, but they use to shelter themselves so that they can operate right under a kindergarten, right under a mosque. So this is a challenge no army has faced. And so that's what makes this war different. And yes, I agree with all of the absolute tragedy and suffering of the Palestinian people, but it's what creates that is the way Hamas fights. And either we can say one of two things. We can either say, well, Israel doesn't have a clean shot, and so they have to let Hamas get away with it because it's too much to bear. But then we are essentially creating a situation where terrorists have found the perfect solution, which is that you can cross the border, go house to house slaughtering your enemies, and then hide behind your own people and they can do nothing about it. It's a perfect strategy. Can we live in a world where we allow that to be an acceptable strategy? I don't think so. And it's very ugly to watch. It's heartbreaking, and I completely understand why people don't think the way I think when they see the videos. I completely get it. But I don't think we can actually live in a world where that's allowed to be a strategy.
I appreciate your perspective.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. You clearly know more about it than I do. But also, one of the fears is that the people in power in Israel wanted Hamas to be in power in Gaza because they wanted an enemy.
And then Coleman has never been on that show again.
Mm-hmm.
Coleman did 3 shows pretty close to each other.
Uh-huh.
Coleman had a pretty powerful short clip there where he defended Israel. I don't even think he was really saying it. He wasn't like really refuting anything that Rogan had said.
Mm-hmm.
He just and that was a very good show, beginning to end. The best show I think that they ever had together. Coleman has never been on that show again.
And that's intentional, you think?
I have no idea.
We don't know.
I don't know.
If he had Barry Weiss on next week to unpack all this, would that change all the things he's done up until now? In your perspective, I'm just curious, like what would be comforting besides this, to...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's many ways to skin the cat of I think, adjusting the course correcting here. But
I think just as important as judging it and fairly and criticizing it fairly, it's also important for us to say why have people that seem to be so sensible and curious on a lot of these issues moved? What's been going on? What's happening?
Okay, but the most important thing, and this is really Sam Harris's point.
Yes.
I keep trying to avoid the Spider-Man analogy, but with great power comes great responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think that's really all Sam was saying is that when you are the biggest media force in the world, when you want to start presenting truly radioactive information, you have some obligation to make sure that you have at least a arguable case that you think it's true. True enough that you think it's likely enough true that you think you're doing a service by injecting it into the public debate.
But you also made the Phil Donahue argument. We don't necessarily think the guest agrees with the host.
Well, because Donahue made it very clear. But I'm saying, so if you're going to say, listen, I think that polio is fake, and all that comes from that. I think so. We assume that he would say to himself, I think I'm doing a good thing if I can get fewer people to believe in polio, fewer kids to vaccinate their kids, just kids free. And that's a very. It seems to me, this is why I feel like I'm being gaslighted. It seems to be obviously that everybody understands that you need to be careful with something like that.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the expertise yourself, as Sam said, then you hire somebody.
We happen to find ourselves in a world where the most popular media format right now is casual, loose, schmooze and conversation. That's what it is, whether we like it or not. It's not curated. It's not careful. It's sloppy, and millions of people are into that right now. And it's hard to demand that format change to something else.
Anything.
You're saying it's they have a responsibility. It's hard to tell comics what to do.
This is not the first time I've known that a few years from now, everyone's going to look back at me and say he was right all along. I've been through these things a couple times already.
What's your track record? What else?
I was right about Russiagate. I was right about Louis C.K. I was right about any Mueller. I was right about any number of things.
You were right about COVID.
I was right about COVID.
What did you say about COVID?
I was right early on that I said that this was serious and that we should
be diligent and prudent.
You were right about anti-Semitism.
I predicted the anti-Semitism. What's happening now? I actually predicted, but I was right that. At some point, I was right about everything about COVID, as opposed to Dr. Bhattacharya, who was actually mostly wrong, and they treat him like he was some kind of oracle.
When you said it was like a lab leak out of China kind of stuff, or
I always assumed it probably was a lab leak, but that was not one of my hot issues. I thought it was ridiculous they're trying to censor.
You were right about masks.
That was very early. N95
But
masks.
I don't understand what the fuck the problem is to just say like, I don't agree with this stuff. I'm going to have these people on air. I'm going to talk to them. But I think that X, Y, and Z is garbage. Like, that's all he really has to say if that's what he thinks. Right? Like, it's not that complicated.
It would make us feel better. There's no question. It just would.
I mean, it seems like a really simple kind of statement. Like, this is not complicated. This is not.
But comedians better than anybody, and they don't like to be told how to have conversations.
But that's neither here nor there. Nobody has to tell him anything.
Well,
he should
I'm
know
saying if you want to appeal to people's sympathy, though, I would caution against making demands.
I'm not trying to.
You're saying you're not doing that, but we are kind of.
You're strategizing now. Strategy is a different conversation.
Who? I am talking. Most of it, the disagreement here is I'm calling out tactics versus substance. We do agree about the substance. I elucidated that in the very beginning of this conversation. All my concerns. We do share a lot of the same concerns. I am talking tactics now, and if the way you're trying to appeal to somebody is by making demands, and they keep getting further away, maybe there's a different way to do that.
Ian Carroll's
it's significant. It's significant what's going on, I'm not denying that, I'm not judging it. But
Ian Carroll's following.
Yeah.
Check this. I forget the number. Skyrocketed on every platform after his Rogan performance.
Oh yeah, this is a good. I want to make this point too. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
That especially when you get on a position of condemnation of such things, Peterson made this point when the woke left came after him illegitimately. Even if we're trying to come after people legitimately, he said that whenever there's a woke mob, he's like, I figured out a way to monetize social justice warriors, because when they come after me, I just ride out the storm and then I come out bigger and stronger than ever, And that's great when the figure is good and the ideas are good. It's really bad when the ideas are bad and nefarious. So the way we react to these things can have a very opposite intended effect by making the problem much bigger and making the guy's audiences much bigger.
No, it's I think it's the opposite.
And I think it applies. If people respond to that, people are familiar. They're so ready to get rid of all this woke crap that when we look like when you posture in the same way, you just made my point for me. You said Ian Carroll's audience exploded.
Avoid bromides. So yes.
What was that?
If somebody is little known, avoid just patent rules of thumb. If somebody's little known, yes, sometimes it's better. Just let it go. Nobody noticed it. So don't call attention to it.
Right.
That's not what's going on here in Ian Carroll. He was on the Rogan show. Now,
yes.
Peterson is saying when they came at me, they made me stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because Peterson had the better of the arguments.
Mm-hmm.
So by bringing that attention, he was able to vanquish the other side by exposing them because he, really handily handled all those arguments.
Mm-hmm.
Don't assume that if the world came at Dave or Joe or any of these people, that they would have Peterson's luck, because I don't believe they have Peterson-level arguments to defend themselves. I don't think there's good arguments that they're going to be able to say, yeah, I know she's, a Nazi, but I think it's okay to say she's awesome and stepping on third rails.
But they are having Peterson's luck. Candace and Ian, you just said blew up after people tried to come after them.
No, I didn't say after they came after him. I said Ian blew up because of the exposure that he got on the Rogan show.
And did the attacks on him or people try to take him down make him more popular or less? Or Daryl for that matter?
More popular or less? I don't know, but
I would say more. That's the thing. I want them to be less popular. I want these people to be dwindled in their influence.
Listen,
I think we can step up to the plate and own and retake the narrative. That's my point. It's from a place of strength and confrontation, not from whittling away.
None of us had heard of Ian Carroll before he was on Rogan's show.
If you're on Twitter, you do.
I had never heard of him. Almost nobody I knew had ever heard of him.
Yep.
He was so little known that one guy who was debunking, I'm sure, said maybe he's a Russian plant because
misfit patriot.
Yeah, how do you account for his sudden popularity?
Yeah,
right.
People think there's some nefarious things going on there for ratioing.
Yeah, I don't believe that. So, but somehow he came to Rogan's attention, and Rogan launched him.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're saying the question, well, after the Rogan launch, is it a net positive to complain about it? I think even if there's some short-term extra exposure the guy gets by complaining about him, like I said, it won't stop itself. We cannot just get open field run.
I agree. We agree. And if you have this small little thing on you and you're like, it's nothing, and you check it out and there's no cancer or anything like that, you could just ignore it. Then it gets bigger and all of a sudden it makes itself known. What do you do? So I would say confront it.
Well, I would think that's the thing. She knows. 2 years ago, before October 7th, I was crying alarm about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In the podcast sphere, not actually. I thought Charlottesville was a nothing burger.
Listen,
the Unite the Right Burger. As I started to hear these conspiracy theories on podcasts, before October 7th, I started to really worry about it.
Were you worried about anti-Semitism in the Trump era?
In the Trump era, no.
Yeah, in 2016 when everybody was saying tiki torches, I wasn't. I wasn't
at all.
That's deranged.
You were worried about anti-Semitism on the left.
On the left, as a matter of fact,
always.
I was always worried about it on the right.
Mm-hmm.
I called that. I just want to say
my response to people who were complaining about Trump was that, come on. With enemies like Trump, we don't need friends. That was like he's.
Well, he's a great guy now. Now you love him, don't you know him? And you know that so well, and we love that. But look, Noam, we are creatures of the Jews know survival. That's our thing. We're about to go into Passover, Pesach, and it's a manual for survival. That's what Eric Weinstein talks about. So, as concerning as it all is, and it's keeping us up, we know how to survive. And if you activate us in survival mode, I think
Okay,
we're going to be okay.
Do not be part of the. Go back and listen again to what Sam Harris said.
Mhm.
He did not argue for deplatforming Joe Rogan. He argued for responsible dissemination of consequential information.
Did you see Gatzad's response to it?
Yes, I thought he completely strawmanned Rogan.
Mhm.
And
you mean Harris?
I keep doing that.
Yes,
that's the thing of age.
Yeah,
that's completely strawmanned Harris, and yeah, that's where I feel about it. I don't know. And
I'm sorry if my
Sam's-
position let you down.
It did.
Mhm.
Sam's weakest point, apparently weakest point, was that he was against Lex Friedman interviewing Putin.
Mhm.
But he had a point there too, meaning like you're not, unless you're prepared to go to Russia
Mhm.
and treat this guy to a real interview, knowing that he poisons journalists and surrounded, then you are in a sense going to play into the guy's hands.
Mhm.
And if you think that he is a force for bad, then you don't want to play into his hands. And that's a general moral point of behavior for all of us. We should not knowingly do something that leads to bad for people or for the world. So now you may think it's not, you may not know. There's various nuances there. But if you're being honest with yourself, you say, you know what, I'd love to do this interview, but I know I have a huge audience, and this is just going to be his way of just spreading this stuff, and I'm not going to be able to interrupt him and correct him, and I'm not going to take that
But
chance.
I think that
maybe I shouldn't do it.
I think that with love, we can actually change the war and the world.
The
That's
world
needs now is love. Well, he was weird. He's like, I'm conflicted about interviewing Netanyahu, but Putin, I'm excited about. I was like, okay, that's a little funny.
Yeah,
but,
because that's exactly who was conflicted. Lex Friedman.
He told. I think he was saying that to Douglas.
No, what is that about? Because Netanyahu, you can ask him whatever you want. You
Yeah.
can challenge him.
Yeah, it's fair enough. But I mean, people used to do this. I mean, Larry King would go these like journalists of legacy in the 90s would interview world leaders and terrorists.
Well,
and, this was
somebody who interviewed Saddam Hussein or something.
I mean, this was like part of
But they would challenge them.
Yes.
They would challenge them. And actually, Ted Turner.
They have to be careful. They're in a cave in Afghanistan. They got to be careful. So one could say, hey, we know the journalist doesn't approve, but it's interesting to profile how these people think, and if Lex can do that, who knows? Maybe it's informative.
The proof will be in the pudding.
Yeah.
If he's going to interview Putin, we'll see how he did. I mean, Tucker Carlson did not do a very good interview.
He was a great guy.
Shut up, obey.
I guess it's Russia. Yeah.
Since we're like 4,000 hours over, can I ask a question?
Yes.
What did you think about Leslie Stahl's interview on 60 Minutes of the hostages?
I didn't see it.
Ugh, no,
Okay, can we talk about that? Listen.
Yes.
We can go a little bit longer if you want. Just 'cause
I'm happy.
I have what we did wrong. We meaning the Jewish people. And again, by the way, speaking of what I was right about, I can show you my chat saying this on like October 9th, telling people avoid the atrocity porn. It's not going to convince anybody. I literally tweet. You remember saying that? Because we felt, look what they did to us. This should be our argument. How can you oppose us after you see what they've done to us? And
That's going to backfire because once the optics come out the other way,
well, I said
we
two
become
things.
the villains.
One thing I said was, okay, but we were about to see daily George Floyd videos and a worldwide defund the police reaction. You remember me saying that?
Yep.
But what I also said was, it's not an argument. If Israel is doing wrong by the Palestinians, that argument is not, nobody's disabused of that idea by the fact that the Palestinians did something awful, that they committed atrocities. What we needed to do over the last 18 months, and we didn't, was explain to people not that October 7th was an atrocity, because the news did that for us, was explain to people why we've tried to make peace, we've tried the two-state solution, they are the ones who don't want peace. It should, every man, woman, and child should know the 5 bullet points of the Israeli position by heart. They don't know any of them. We squandered all the attention by trying to say, please, don't you see what they did to us? Don't you see what they did to us? And of course, inconveniently, some of the things we said they did to us didn't even happen, which really made us sound like we're crying wolf. And then we just got into this proven negative debate, again, with whether there were rapes or there weren't rapes.
Insane. Just to get into that.
And it got us nowhere. But when Bill Clinton comes on and says, listen, I was at the meeting and we offered them 99% of the state. And to this day, they still won't take it. That people say, really? Wait, you guys are doing October 7th? Even though you were offered all that? I didn't know you were offered all. Oh, you were attacked? The reason the territories are occupied are because they attacked Israel? You mean Israel didn't take the territories? And then Israel tried to give it back right after and they were turned down? Like, these things actually matter to people. People we didn't do that at all. And the result was predictable.
Yeah, I know.
We lost the argument.
You lose the argument also because I think you have to defend yourself and not have to worry about defending what you're doing when you have asserting a position of strength and saying, we have to do this. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be bad. And I think when Israel contradicts its own position or weakens its own position when it tries to say Hamas is completely responsible for all of this, and yet we are also responsible. Like, by trying to do this sort of left-wing posture of we're sending humanitarian aid and we're trying to help, look at the optics. Like, own the fact that you have to do what you have to do. It's horrible. War is horrible. You didn't want this. But I always thought, like, the second you get on the news and you say, like, we're sending 800 trucks. It's not 300 trucks. You're lying. It's like, trucks, no trucks. You're at war with Palestine, with Hamas, with the Gaza Strip.
But you know, the Biden administration gave Israel no choice.
Yeah,
at various.
But I just also think that was a part of weakening, because when people see that, they feel gaslit. They're like, what are you talking about? And I think having to own the position that, like, we have to do this. We have to defend our citizens. We can't compromise the security of our people and our state for the altruistic aims of trying to help the civilians of Gaza. We have to put our country and our civilians as paramount, and that's our priority. That's what the responsibility of any Western government is. And so when you try to do that and claim Hamas is responsible, but then also take responsibility for the well-being, you're just kind of weak. You're like one hand, you're taking water out of the lake here and pouring it into here, and you're not actually gaining any momentum. Because people might hate you, but they'll respect the fact that you're doing what you have to do.
The truth is, we don't know whether it was the right thing to do. It wasn't an immoral thing to do based on what was known prospectively. But in retrospect, if nothing positive comes from all this, if it resets almost to the status quo ante and rockets start coming again, it's going to be hard to justify all those.
What, Israel's response?
It will be hard to say they did the right thing in retrospect, given 2030, all the innocent people that died and suffered and have no homes. It can only be considered to have been a success if there's something good to show for it. If it resets to exactly the same situation as
I agree
prior,
with that.
It's going to be very difficult to say we did the right thing. But I want to just repeat myself. It doesn't mean it was an immoral thing to do going forward, because you don't know the future.
Yes, but at the end of the day, I think war, if you're going to do it, it has to be ruthless and quick and not be dragged out for 18 months. You have to do it to the point where you do it to win, and the standard is victory and self-defense to secure your citizens and your state. Now, the hostages made that also much more complex and difficult, but I think the extent to which Israel was not restraining itself.
Our argument there is a little bit BS-ish.
What's that?
Because Hamas made it somewhat easier for us by not releasing us, meaning Israel. I'm speaking full dual loyalty mode now. Hamas made it easier for Israel by not releasing the hostages. However, if Hamas had released all the hostages on day one, Israel still had all the same reasons that they had to go in there.
I meant they made it complicated because you don't want to compromise the lives of the hostages that are there while you're in Gaza.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I meant that as a bombardment of Gaza when you're trying to destroy Hamas.
What I'm referring to is many.
I know. You're saying it's all about just rescuing the hostages.
Well, if you want to do something, just release the hostages.
And surrender.
No, don't.
No, release the hostages
and surrender.
And unequivocally surrender. You cannot be here anymore. You must be gone.
Yes.
That's the
surrender
standard.
was the key.
I meant the hostages made it complicated for Israel militarily because they're putting them at risk when they have to do it. But I actually think you get more hostages back when Israel. This part of the world doesn't respond to restraint; they respond to power.
No part of the world responds to. No hostage taker responds to.
Correct,
restraint.
and I think that's when you start getting hostages back. When you start to say that Israel is unapologetic and is going to assert its strength and do what it has to do. And the fact that they didn't do that, and maybe that's because of Biden, and maybe that's because of restrictions put on Israel. I don't really know. I'm not a military tactician.
You show me. You show me somebody. It's amazing how things are predictable. You show me somebody with a vocal fry. And I can guarantee you they're for restraint.
Full circle.
I'm not kidding.
I don't know, Matthew McConaughey. You think he's for restraint?
No, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's amazing how these things do correlate.
But maybe Matthew McConaughey's got a big fry, and he would support us for destroying Hamas. That's what he would do, especially using a Lincoln. It's not a tank. Full circle. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
That was some hefty schmoozing right there. Now we got into the weeds. It was good. Okay.
Where do you live?
I'm in Jersey.
In Jersey.
I'm close.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, letters a podcast at comedycellar.com. And what's your Twitter information?
At Ami Kozak, AMIKOZAK, on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Podcast is called Ami's House.
Hopefully they'll throw you off those platforms soon.
Please don't campaign for that.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.